Hello, and today I want to talk about the Psalms of Solomon, another ancient writing, and one that leads us from the life in Egypt from last week to life under Roman rule, uh, both internal to and external to Palestine. So just to start with a little of the history behind the this period. We're coming now to the end of the Hasmonean rule. The Queen Alexandra Salome, at her death, her sons fight over who takes the throne after her. This becomes enough of a problem that they both independently seek help for their cause from General Pompey, or Pompey the Great, who was currently with the Roman army in Syria. They lots of machinations go back and forth, but Pompey was a very famous general and statesman from in Rome, so a very influential, important figure. So they go to both appeal to him to help their cause, but in the end, he comes to Jerusalem, and instead he lays siege to the city in 64 and 63. The city falls in 63, and so there is no real destruction. It says that he entered the temple, even the Holy of Holies, but which of course polluted it, but had it ordered it to be consecrated again, and did not much mess with that at all. So this was a relatively painless siege compared to some of the others that we've seen. So at this point, because of Pompey, the term that gets used sometimes is that Judea becomes a client state of Rome. And so Hyrcanus the second to last ruler of the Hasmonean dynasty, is allowed to rule with the because of the support of the Roman government. But again, that it is not truly independent. His power is there as ruler because of the Romans. So and like I said, it lasts only one more generation, to about 37, when Herod the Great takes over. So that's the historical background. The Romans of this period, the Roman control over the region, at least indirectly. So the Psalms of Solomon themselves, we date them to about, they mention Pompey's invasion, so sometime between that 63 date, it mentions also the death of Pompey, very accurately, or accurately enough that they had to be aware of it. And Pompey died in 48. All of this BCE. It also mentions, some people believe that it mentions the murder of Hyrcanus the second at 30. So basically any time between 63 and the end of the century. The Psalms of Solomon come from Jerusalem, we believe, but they're probably most likely originally written in the Hebrew, which explains the weird sort of syntax of the translation, that it was translated from the Hebrew. Now, whether the name Psalms of Solomon was attached to it before it was translated, or whether that was the original name, we don't know. But again, that's a pseudonymous authorship, and Solomon's connection with all things Psalmic. So again, Jerusalem Hebrew. Again, the Psalms of Solomon were very important, mentioned in early Christian manuscripts. So it did have some influence on Christian thinkers. That's abbreviation for manuscripts. But they were lost to us until the 17th century, when, except for in fragments and then in these occasional mentions of them in other Christian literature, the 17th century, when they were found and published. They were found in a library in Augsburg. So they disappeared and they were found again. Again, Jerusalem, the Hebrew, the original language. We have it in Syriac and some other languages, but and important again for the early church. The style, they are called psalms, but it's a style, is a mixture of genres, both psalmic and some wisdom elements. Psalmic, wisdom influence, you get prophetic influence. So they're called psalms, but they're a mixed bag of writings, and there are 18 total, all of them relatively short. The group that produced them, or what group or the attitude or theology, clearly we can't attach it to a specific group, but we can say some things about them. And they were clearly, there's a lot of talk about righteous and wicked, which seems to be aimed at the Hasmoneans. So the idea is that this is a group that it sees the Hasmoneans as wicked, corrupt. You have the high priest's office clearly, ensconced within the Hasmonean household, so both king and high priest, and all of this was, a lot for some people at the time. Now, whether they were perhaps like the Pharisees, if we knew enough to make that, but they were similar. So, but who knows what other group might have been around at the time. But clearly a group that would seem similar in theology to the Pharisees, who were against the Hasmoneans and saw that the temple and the leadership circles of Jerusalem were corrupt. And it does talk in Psalm 4 about men pleasers. There's this, you get the sense here that the rulers were and their sycophants were all trying to keep the Romans happy and everybody happy, and not God, and not caring about God. So as we go through the topics that the 18 Psalms sort of have about, the topics of the Psalms, the invasion of Jerusalem seems to be is the topic of at least 3 of them, where we get a clear description of the invasion of Jerusalem, and that would be 1, 2, and 8, all very specific. Now, the reference to men pleasers is in 4. Again, just so specific. It just seems like it's got to be a specific group of people that they're talking about, and that unfortunately has been lost to us. Now, again, I said there's a lot of talk, a lot of Psalms here that talk about the fate of the righteous and the wicked, and there are several Psalms that talk about divine intervention in Jerusalem. And if you wanted to know, I guess I could list them out. 3, 6, 9, 10, 13 through 15 are all related to this. Then the ones that are sort of categorized under the theme of divine intervention are 5, 7, 11, 12, and 16. What makes the Psalms particularly intriguing in our context is the messianic Psalms. So the Messiah becomes the context, the focus of the last two Psalms. So invasion of Jerusalem, this interesting psalm about some specific group known as men pleasers of men, the pious, contrasting the pious and the wicked, with clearly the wicked being the Hasmonean leadership, divine intervention. So there, and then lastly the Messiah. So this is very, very intriguing. But first, I did want to say that the in terms of theology, the Psalms of Solomon are very Deuteronomic. So in their attitude, so the wicked are being judged based on their following the Deuteronomic law, Deuteronomic covenant, and why do things like the invasion occur? Just with Deuteronomic theology, God allows these things to happen as a form of punishment of God's people for not living up to the covenant. So that, very clearly we have sinned. That's what's going on. But along with it, that there is the sense of the overweening pride of men like Pompey and the Hasmonean rulers and the Hasmonean households, that mean that because of their pride, this punishment from God is harsher because of the pride of the individual, of the rulers, not the individual people, but of these men who would try to please each other and not God. So I wanted then to say something briefly. The Psalms of Solomon then, in these Psalms 17 and 18, the first clearly articulated hope for a Messiah, for a Davidic Messiah. So again, that how to unpack that clearly. The idea of David and the promise to David that comes from Samuel, but then articulated in Isaiah. So the promise made to David in the book of Samuel, articulated as a promise in a larger sense in Isaiah, but this is the first time we see it articulated in a post-monarchy, post-Davidic monarchy. So we know that they hoped for the Messiah but this is the first time we get it in written form from this period. But it's also important to remember that this hope, if you read these, is historical. So it is, or to say, it's not apocalyptic. And this is very much, if you read the Gospels, what was the hope of those who follow Jesus, at least some of them, that he was this Davidic Messiah, that historical, that it would be militant, that it would involve some sort of violence against the Romans at this point, and the Hasmoneans and the Romans, and so an earthly political Messiah or figure attached, who would overthrow the Romans, attached to the promises to David. And so we see a step forward in how this period was working with messianic texts. And here's the thing. When we go from, you can't draw a straight line from any book of the Old Testament to the Christian understanding of the Messiah. But you can't do that without looking at the Second Temple period stuff. And so what we see sort of clarify what I'm saying is that Second Temple period, I'm not even writing properly today, Second Temple period, how then do we see it, the different combinations that get us from here to here? And so Song of Solomon is one of those first places where we clearly see the attachment of a messianic idea to the to the royal house of David, to a future hope. And I'm going to say that what in some ways what these two psalms do is attach Isaiah with Psalm 2, and an important psalm in messianic interpretation. But so go back and read these, look at them, see, be clear as you're reading them that this is a stepping stone. Do not read the Christian understanding of a Messiah into Song of Solomon. Rather, see it as a staging between the two, because it and there's a real purpose to this. How did the church understand Jesus? And there are a lot of people over time who have said, when they called, how did the church understand Jesus? What did they mean when they called him Messiah? And a lot of people have said it's just a creation of the early church, but they couldn't have understood it this way, that and it really couldn't have been Jesus, that it was later individuals who were putting it back onto Jesus. And being able to show that there is a line, and that we can look at places along the way from the Old Testament to the New Testament and see how it developed, is a way of saying, it's another way of showing that the church's understanding of Jesus was not made up whole hog, as some would say, but rather it was an organic outgrowth of the way that people were using the Old Testament at that time. And so I mentioned Isaiah and Psalm 2. When we get to in my next lecture on the parables of Enoch, I'm going to spend some time actually focusing on what traditions, what passages were used to bring together this understanding of the Messiah. So we've, with the Psalm of Solomon, we've got Isaiah and connected with Psalm 2, and so we'll see how it sort of develops in the next book that we'll study, and that is the parables of Enoch, as found in the book of Enoch.